Hello and welcome to this video. In this tutorial, we are going to continue learning about object-oriented programming in Java. So go ahead and open the OOP Java project. And then here, first we are going to learn about the constructor. So what is a constructor? A constructor is just a piece of code or a method that executes when the object of a specific type is created. So what is the syntax of creating a new object? You just need to type in here new, and then for example, if you want to create a new object of the kickboxer class, you just need to refer to the class and a pair of parentheses, semicolon. So this parenthesis here, this pair of parentheses is called the constructor that is called whenever that you create a new object of a specific type. So here we created a new object of type kickboxer, and we have this pair of parentheses that is called the constructor. So whenever you create a new object, the constructor is going to be called. A constructor can be empty, or it might ask you to pass some values. So let's go ahead and learn about it. Let's go inside a boxer class. And here, first of all, so here you can see that we have this getter and the setter for the number of gloves attributes. You can also create getters and setters for the punch speed and punch power attributes. But here, in order to create a constructor, you just need to put the keyword public. And here I want you to know that all objects, all the classes, has a default constructor, but the implementation is just empty. There is no specific implementation that does a specific job. But if you want to, you can create your own customized constructor for a specific class and add some more features to your class, or in other words, specify some parameters for the constructor so that the user can pass some values for the instance variables, or you can just create some conditions inside the constructor. So let's say that we have a constructor. So the constructor must be public because we want to use it in other classes. And then a constructor doesn't have a return type. So that's the difference between a constructor and a method. So you just need to type in here the name of your class. So the name of your constructor must be the same as the name of your class. So I'm going to type in here boxer, and then a pair of parentheses. So you just need to open and close your class by using these curly braces. So this is just called a constructor. Now inside this constructor, I can do whatever I want. For example, I can change the values of my instance variables. So let's say that when we declare our instance variables, we do not initialize them. So let's, for example, we do not want to assign the value number 2 to this number of gloves, or this 100, or just this 200 for this punch power. We just declared our instance variables, and these instance variables are not initialized. We can go inside a boxer class and initialize them here. I can refer to the number of gloves and assign the value number 2. Or I can refer to the punch speed or punch power and assign the value of 500, and finally the punch speed, assign the value of 300, semicolon. So this way of initializing our instance variable is much more better. Why? Because the moment that we create a new object of type boxer, then our instance variables are initialized. I'm not saying that you shouldn't initialize your instance variables when you declare them. You can do that, but I like this style better, and it's much more understandable. So we have a constructor, and inside the constructor we initialize the instance variables. So next, go ahead and open the main activity class, and here make sure that you have a breakpoint here in line number 13. So when the content view is going to be the activity underline main, I'm gonna create a breakpoint so that I can control the flow of the program. And then I'm gonna click on this debugger, this debug icon, So now at the bottom, the variables area is opened. And I'm gonna click on step over. And here it's gonna execute this line of code that is going to create a new boxer object and assign it to this myBoxer variable. Let's click on step over again. So now inside this variables area, you should see that a new variable named boxer is created with a new boxer object. If I open it, you can see that it says that we have some attributes and they are initialized with these values. Number of gloves 2, punch power 500, and the punch speed is 300. So if you switch to the boxer class, here you can see that we assigned these values to our instance variables inside the constructor of this class. Okay? So if I delete these codes that I put inside the constructor, now you should know that each class has a constructor. So for example, if I delete this constructor here, then you should not think that the boxer class doesn't have a constructor at all. It does have a constructor because a boxer class inherits from the object class, and an object class has a constructor. But you should know that the default constructor doesn't do anything, okay? So that's why we created a customized constructor here that is going to initialize our instance variables. So inside this boxer class and inside the constructor, what about providing some parameters? When we want to create a new object of type boxer, how about initializing our instance variables there? So what I mean is, let's delete these lines of code inside the constructor and let's provide some parameters. Let's say that we have number of gloves. So by the way, you don't have to specify the name of your parameter the same as the name of your instance variable, but I'm gonna just name it the same. So number of gloves, and here this is going to be the name, but first we need to specify the data type, integer, comma. So what is the second instance variable? The second one is punch speed. So I'm gonna type in here int punch speed, comma, and finally we have the punch power, so int punch power. So now that we have provided these parameters for the boxer constructor, we can initialize our instance variables by assigning these parameters to our instance variables. So I can use this dot number of gloves, assignment operator, number of gloves, semicolon. So you know that this means the instance and the number of gloves is referring to the instance variable number of gloves, assignment operator. So we want to assign this parameter, number of gloves, to this instance variable. Next we have this dot punch speed, assignment operator punch speed, semicolon. Next we have this dot punch power, assignment operator punch power, semicolon. So now that we initialized our instance variables by using these parameters, we can go ahead and open the main activity class, and then we can create a new object. But now it is going to show us an error in this line of code where we are creating a new object of type boxer. So if I try to run the app, it is going to show us a compile error. It says compilation failed. So inside this compiler area, you can see that it says that the constructor boxer in class boxer cannot be applied to given types. Required integer, integer, integer. Found no argument here. So this means that the constructor of the boxer class needs to pass free arguments. We need to pass free arguments of type integer to this constructor. But we have no arguments here. We just have a pair of parentheses here. So here, let me delete this syntax and I'm going to write it again. So I'm going to type in here new boxer. And now it is going to show us that we need to pass free values of type integers. The first one is going to be the number of gloves. So I'm going to pass number 2, comma. Next, it asks us to pass the punch speed. So I'm going to pass 400, comma. Next, we need to pass the punch power. I'm going to pass 900. semicolon. So now we have a new object of type boxer. And if I try to create a new object of type boxer without passing these arguments, then we are going to wind up with a compilation error. So let's go ahead and click on debug here, debug icon. Make sure that you have already created a breakpoint here. And then we should wait so that the debugging area is opened. So here I'm going to click on step over, and now it is about to execute this line of code that is going to create a new object of type boxer. So I'm going to click on step over again. Now here you can see inside this variables area, this my boxer here. If I open it, it says the number of gloves is 2, the punch power is 900, and the punch speed is 400. Inside the boxer class, you can go ahead and create a condition. You can create an if statement and check whether the values that are passed to this constructor are valid or not. So for example, if the user passed the value 0 as the value of the number of gloves to this constructor, then that is an invalid value, and we shouldn't assign that value to the number of gloves instance variable. So that's why, again, a constructor is very useful. So that is actually your challenge. Go ahead and open your boxer class. Inside the boxer constructor, go ahead and create a condition, an if statement, that is going to determine whether the values that are going to be passed to this constructor are valid or not. If yes, then execute these lines of code. If not, then return. So give it a go and good luck. So let's go ahead and solve this challenge. So I'm gonna go inside this boxer constructor and create an if statement. So here first, let me tell you that we have a typo for the name of this number of gloves. I forgot to put an L here. So let me first solve this problem. Now here we have an if statement, and we can say if the number of gloves, I am referring to our parameter. Notice that when I am referring to my parameter, the parameter name is highlighted. So if the number of gloves is less than or equal to number 0, so here we need to use an OR operator. So if you want to use the OR operator, hold down the shift key and then the backward / key on your keyboard. So here it is called the OR operator. If the number of gloves is less than or equal to 0, or the punch speed is less than or equal to 0, or again we are going to use the OR operator, the punch power is less than or equal to 0. If only one of these conditions is true, then we are going to type in here return. If only one of the values, for example, the number of gloves or the punch speed or the punch power, is an invalid value, then we are not going to execute these lines of code after this if statement. We are not going to initialize our instance variables because an invalid value is passed to our constructor. So now here I just need to go ahead, go to main activity class, and then this time click on this debugging icon. Now I'm gonna click on step over, and then it is about to execute this line of code. So notice that here I passed the value number 0 as the value of the number of gloves, which is an invalid value. But you can see that we have the punch speed and the punch power. So these two values are valid, but this one is invalid. So this means that it's gonna go inside the boxer class, inside the boxer constructor, and here it's gonna take a look at this if statement. And here we put OR logical operator. This means that only one of these expressions need to be true so that the entire expression evaluates to true, and it's gonna go ahead and go inside the curly braces of this if statement and execute this return statement. Let's go back to main activity, and I'm gonna go ahead and click on step over in order to execute this line of code. Now here inside this variables area, you can see that a variable of type myBoxer is created, and it has a new object of type boxer. But take a look at these instance variables. The number of gloves is 0. the punch power is 0 and the punch speed is 0. So if you go to the boxer class, here you can see that first it didn't execute the lines of code after this if statement because we have this return statement. And you can see that we didn't assign any values to our instance variables. So how do we get those numbers here? These, for example, number 0 for our instance variables. This is because of the default value for our instance variables. If you remember, in the previous tutorials, I talked about this concept that your instance variables can have a default value. For example, if you create a variable of type string, and if you don't initialize it, then the value null is going to be assigned to your variable. Or in case of the primitive data types, for example, the integer, the value 0 is going to be assigned to your variable. So that's it. So this is the concept of constructors. So hopefully that makes sense. So now it's challenge time. Go into the Kickboxer class and create a constructor here, and then initialize the instance variables of the Kickboxer class by using the constructor. So give it a go and good luck. So now let's go ahead and solve this challenge. First, let's go inside the curly braces of the Kickboxer class here. So the ending curly brace of the file is related to the Kickboxer class. And inside an empty area, I'm going to click on right click here and then click on generate and then click on constructor. So here we want to initialize all of our instance variables inside the constructor. So I'm going to select all of my instance variables here and then click on OK. So in order to select your instance variables, you just need to hold down the shift key and then select the instance variables. So now you can see that a new constructor, a customized constructor is created for us. Here you can see the parameters, kick speed, kick power, punch speed, punch power. And then here we can see that all of our instance variables are initialized. But if you go into the main activity class, now we have a problem. So in this line of code that we are creating a new object of type Kickboxer, it is showing us an error. So it's your challenge. Go ahead and solve this problem. So when you are done, then continue watching this tutorial and see how I am going to solve this challenge. Good luck. So here we just need to pass the proper parameters. So I'm going to delete this syntax here. I'm going to again type in here new Kickboxer, and we need to pass the proper values. So first we need to pass the kick speed. I'm going to pass 500, comma. Notice that how I am separating these arguments by using the comma. Next we have the kick power. I'm going to pass 700, comma. We have the punch speed. I'm going to pass 20, comma. And we have the punch power as the final arguments that we need to pass, which is going to be number 30, semicolon. So now we have successfully created this Kickboxer object. And I have another challenge for you. Go ahead and go inside the Kickboxer constructor and create the same condition that we created for the boxer class, and make sure that we cannot pass an invalid value for the kick speed, kick power, or punch speed, or the punch power. And give it a go and good luck. So because I have already shown you how to solve this challenge for the boxer class, so this challenge is the same as that one, so I'm not gonna solve this challenge here again. Now it's time to learn about static variables. So we have instance variables and we have static variables. Instance variables are specific to instances to the class, instances of the class that we create. But the static variables are related to all of the objects that we create out of a class. So static variables are also called shared variables. This means that each object that we create out of a class has the same value for that variable. It is shared among all of the objects. So let's go ahead and let me show you a real world example, and then it will completely make sense. Let's go ahead and open the boxer class. Let's create a new variable. Let's say that we have a variable, and this time we can declare it as public. Let's say it is public, and it is also a static variable, and it is an integer variable. Let's name it as stamina. So let's assign the value 59, for example, to this variable, semicolon. This variable is a static variable. What do I mean by this? I mean that if you go to the main activity class, and here, for example, I want to refer to my boxer object, and I can say dot, let's refer to our stamina variable, and then assign the value 40 to this variable. Now let's create a new boxer object. So here I'm gonna say that boxer, and I'm gonna name it as new boxer. Excuse me, I need to type in here new boxer. Assignment operator, new boxer. So we need to pass some values. So the number of gloves, I'm gonna pass number 4, for example, comma, speed 50, and the power 80, semicolon. And for the new boxer here, I'm gonna output the value of the stamina of the new boxer. So let's see what happens. I'm gonna type in here log.i. So let's pass the tag, comma, and then here we need to say new boxer stamina, comma, and then let's refer to the new boxer dot stamina. So let's convert this value to a string value. So here it's showing us an error. If I hover over this error area, it's because of the semicolon that I need to pass. So here you can see that I passed a third argument that is not correct. I should have concatenated this value with a new boxer stamina. So new boxer dot stamina. Let's go ahead and run our app and let's see what happens. Go ahead and open the logcat area, and here it says new boxer stamina 40. So remember that inside the boxer class we assigned the value 59 as the stamina, and inside the main activity class we set the stamina of the my boxer to 40. But here we are outputting the stamina of the new boxer. Why it is showing us 40? Because the stamina variable is a shared variable. It is static. This value is shared among all of the instances. So for example, if I change the value of the stamina, so for example, if I say new boxer dot stamina, assignment operator, for example, 70, semicolon, then if I try to output the stamina of the my boxer to the console, you will see that the stamina of the my boxer is also 70. So let me copy this line of code and then paste it here. And here I'm gonna say, instead of new boxer, I'm gonna say my boxer. And I'm gonna say my boxer dot stamina. Let's run our app. So now in the console, here, you should see that the value of the stamina of the my boxer is 70. So another important point about the static variables is that you don't have to create a new object of your class in order to access the stamina. I can change the value of the stamina variable by using the boxer class. I can say boxer dot stamina assignment operator, for example, 900, semicolon. So when I say the boxer class, you can see that the boxer class starts with a capital B. Dot stamina, because it is static, I can call the stamina on the boxer class in order to change its value. And when I set the value to be 900, this 900 is going to be shared among all of the objects that we create out of the boxer class. This 900 is going to be the value of the stamina of all the objects. So let's go back to our boxer class. So how about declaring our static variable as private? We can do that. We can change the public to private. And then we can go ahead and generate a getter and a setter. So inside an empty area, inside the boxer class, I'm going to right click here and then click on generate and click on getter and setter and choose the stamina. Or let's also choose other variables also and click on OK. So here you can see that a getter is created for the stamina instance variable and also a setter here. But notice that the getter and the setter methods, both of them are static. We have also static methods. So this means that we can go into the main activity class and instead of, for example, using the stamina itself, here we can say myBoxer dot set stamina. And then we just need to, for example, if I here want to change it, this value to number 40, I just need to pass the value 40 here and semicolon. Or also, we can also change the stamina of the new boxer. So I'm going to comment out this line of code. And here, if I want to call the setter on the class, I just need to type in here boxer dot set stamina and then pass a value, for example, 20. Or I can also call the get stamina. So boxer dot get stamina semicolon. So here I can go ahead and copy this line of code and paste it here and then cut this boxer dot get stamina and paste it here. So for example, myBoxer dot stamina, or let's say instead of saying myBoxer, let's say all boxers stamina. All boxers stamina. Let's go ahead and open the logcat area, clear this area, and then click on run. And here it's going to show us a compilation error because here we are still have some references to the stamina variable and it is actually private, so we cannot do that. Let me comment out these two lines of code. Let's go ahead and run our app again. And here let's go ahead and open the logcat. So here you should see that it says all boxers stamina 20. So hopefully that makes sense. And now it's time to learn about inheritance. So here assume that we have the boxer class and the kickboxer, right? So how about creating a class called fighter? Let's go ahead and open our Android view. Right click on this package that contains all of our classes, new Java class. Let's name this class as fighter. The kind is class, and here don't change anything. Make sure that the visibility is public and the modifiers is none and click on OK. So the fighter class is a class that can have some of the attributes that we put inside the boxer and the kickboxer class. For example, a fighter class can have the punch power, the punch speed, and also the number of gloves. So I'm gonna copy these attributes and go inside the fighter class and paste them here. So now that we pasted these attributes inside the fighter class, let's go ahead and generate the getters and setters because we set the accessibility of these attributes to be private. So I'm gonna right click inside an empty area, generate getter and setter, and select these attributes, click on OK. Next, let's go ahead and create a constructor. So right click, generate, click on constructor, select these attributes, click on OK. And here, let me tell you that when you are creating a constructor, you don't have to initialize your attributes. But here I just wanted to initialize them and show you how we can pass values to our constructor. So now let me tell you something here. You can see that we have a class called fighter, right? And the class called fighter has these attributes: number of gloves, punch speed, and punch power. And we have also the boxer class. The boxer class has these attributes that are shared with the fighter class: number of gloves, punch speed, punch power. So how about we say that the boxer is a fighter. So I am telling you that there is an is-or relationship between the boxer class and the fighter class. A boxer is a fighter. So what do I mean by that? I can say that the boxer extends the fighter class. So this is called inheritance. Inheritance is just an is-or relationship between two classes. And in Java, a class can only inherit from one class. So our boxer class is extending the fighter class. This means that the boxer is a fighter. And this means that the boxer class can inherit all of the features and behaviors or properties of the fighter class. But if we have private properties inside the fighter class, then the boxer class cannot access them. So we have another access modifier in Java that is called protected. So protected means that only subclasses of a class can access the attributes. So if you go to the fighter class, and here, instead of saying private and I say protected, let's change the private to protected. Here, this means that only a class that inherits from the fighter class, so in this case the boxer class inherits from the fighter class, can access the attributes, the properties, because they are protected. So because we set the access modifier of these attributes to be protected, the boxer class that inherits from the fighter class can access those attributes. So I can now delete these attributes here inside the boxer class because it is now inheriting from the fighter class, right? And here you can see that although we deleted the attributes of the boxer class, we don't have any errors with the getters and the setters. Here you can see, for example, we have a method called get number of gloves, and it says return number of gloves multiplied by 3. So we get the number of gloves here from the fighter class. So if I go to the fighter class and say that the number of gloves is private, let's see what happens. Let's go to the boxer class. Now it's showing us an error. Now it says that the number of gloves has private access in the fighter class. But if I go back to the fighter class and change the access modifier of this number of gloves to be protected, that only the subclasses or the classes that inherit from the fighter class can access this attribute. If I go back to the boxer class, now we have no problems regarding this number of gloves attribute. So hopefully that makes sense. And if it sounds a little bit confusing, that's okay. So you can rewatch this tutorial and you will learn all about the inheritance in Java in this course. We are going to build a lot of applications that will show you how to take advantage of these features. So let's go back to the fighter class. And here we have the protected, but we don't have to set the access modifier to be protected because we have the getters and setters here. But here, if you want to, for example, have getters and the setters that the fighter class has, then you should set the access modifier of the attributes of your fighter class to be protected. Now that we solved this problem, we have another problem inside the boxer class. So here it says that the constructor, there is, if you hover over this error area, it says there is no default constructor available in the fighter class. So what does this mean? Because the boxer class is now inheriting from the fighter class, then the boxer class, the constructor of the boxer class, must actually call the constructor of the superclass. So first, let me tell you that what is a superclass? A superclass is a class that this boxer class inherits from. So in this case, the superclass is the fighter class. So what is a subclass? The subclass is a class that inherits from another class. So in this case, the boxer class inherits from the fighter class. So the boxer is subclass and the fighter is superclass. So here it says that inside the constructor of the boxer class, we must call the constructor of the superclass, which is the fighter class. Okay, so here, before calling this if statement, I need to say super, And then inside the parentheses of this super statement, here we are calling the constructor of the superclass, right? So if you go to the fighter class and see the constructor of this superclass or the fighter class, you can see that we need to pass 3 arguments to this constructor: the number of gloves, the punch speed, and the punch power. So go back to the boxer class, and we need to pass the same arguments to this constructor, to this super. So we need to pass the number of gloves, comma, the punch speed, comma, and finally the punch power. Notice that we get the values from the parameters that we specified for this boxer constructor. Okay? So now, if I go ahead and delete this constructor here, so I just highlighted this constructor and then delete it. Now, it is showing us an error. If I hover over this error area, you can see that it says public class boxer. It says there is no default constructor available in the fighter class. This means that if you declare a constructor in the superclass, you must call that constructor in the subclass. So we must go to the boxer class and we need to undo our action here so that we have our constructor, and we must call the constructor of the superclass by typing here super, and then if the constructor of the superclass has parameters, we need to pass those parameters here. So hopefully that makes sense. And if it sounds a little bit confusing, that's okay. This is inheritance. You will master this concept as we write applications or complex applications in this course. So now that we solved this problem, it's challenge time. Go ahead. We have another class called kickboxer. So the kickboxer can also inherit from the fighter class, right? So the kickboxer class has some of its own attributes. Or for example, the kickboxer can inherit from the boxer class, because the boxer class has some of the attributes of a kickboxer, for example, the punch speed and the punch power. So you can go ahead and inherit from another class and then make sure to solve any other problems regarding the constructor and maybe calling an attribute that is private. So it is your challenge. Go ahead and give it a go, and then continue watching this tutorial and see how I am going to solve this challenge. So good luck. So now that we have the kickboxer class, let's say that the kickboxer extends from the boxer class. So if the kickboxer extends from the boxer class, this means that the kickboxer is a boxer, okay? So because the boxer inherits from the fighter class, this means that the kickboxer class indirectly inherits from the fighter class. So again, this means that the kickboxer is a fighter. So let's say that the kickboxer extends the boxer, and then here we have the constructor of the kickboxer class. So again, because if you hover over this error area, it says there is no default constructor in the boxer class. So because we have created a customized constructor inside the boxer class, we need to call that constructor. But if we didn't create a customized constructor inside the boxer class, then we wouldn't have to call that constructor here, or the constructor of the superclass, because the Java will call that constructor for us automatically. Remember what I told you about constructors? Each class has its own constructor. There is a default constructor that does nothing. So if you don't create a customized constructor inside the boxer class, then the kickboxer class that inherits from the boxer class wouldn't have to call that constructor, because the Java will automatically call that constructor for us. So for example, if you want to call a default constructor, you just have to type in here super and then a pair of parentheses. But because we have a customized constructor here, then we just have to call that constructor and pass the required arguments. So now we need to type in here super. So the constructor of the superclass, the boxer class, has some arguments. So let's go to the constructor of the superclass, and here you can see we have number of gloves, punch speed, and the punch power. So go back to the kickboxer class. So we need to pass the same values here. We can say number of gloves, comma, punch speed, comma, and the punch power. So here it says that there is a problem with the number of gloves. It says cannot reference fighter.number of gloves before supertype constructor has been called. So here this means that we cannot access the number of gloves attribute that we inherit from the boxer class, and here you can see that the boxer class doesn't have the number of gloves attribute, so it inherits from the fighter class. So if I hold down the control key, and if you are using Mac, just hold down the command key and then click on fighter, here you can see the fighter class and it has the number of gloves. But now it says that it is true that the kickboxer class inherits from the fighter class indirectly, but here we cannot access the number of gloves attribute from the fighter class before calling the super constructor. So here we can add another parameter to this kickboxer constructor. We can say int number of gloves, comma. So we added another parameter to this constructor of this kickboxer, and here I just refer to this number of gloves here. So now inside this kickboxer class, you can see that we don't have to have the punch speed and the punch power, because the kickboxer class indirectly inherits from the fighter class. So let's delete these two attributes. And you can see that I deleted these two attributes, but for example, we have the get punch speed method here, and here we can return the punch speed. How do we get the punch speed here? We get the punch speed from the fighter class. You can see that here, right? So this is the power of constructor. We have less code and much power. So we have the get punch speed, the get punch power, and all of them works fine, and we can easily refer to them. Why? Because we declared our attributes inside the fighter class to be protected. So what is a good programming practice here? Here I do not recommend that you allow your subclasses to access your attributes. So for example, if I declare these attributes inside the fighter class to be private, then you can see that we have no problems regarding these private attributes, because we have getters and setters here. So we can go ahead and go inside the boxer class, and here you can see that, for example, this get number of gloves method, it returns the number of gloves, for example, multiplied by 3. So let's delete this multiplied by 3 here. So now we cannot refer to this attribute, but we can refer to the getter method of the fighter class regarding the number of gloves. So I can say return get number of gloves. That's it. It's much more better. It's a very, very good programming practice that you do not allow even your subclasses to access your attributes. This is a very great feature that we can use. So for example, we have this set number of gloves. So here I can say, instead of saying this number of gloves, I can refer to the setter method of the superclass, because we have this set number of gloves here, right? So I can say setter, so set number of gloves, and then we can easily pass the value that we get as a parameter. So let me delete this assignment operator and this number of gloves here. So inside the parentheses, we just need to pass the argument, so number of gloves. So now the problem is solved, right? So here, for example, we have this constructor. So again, here we can use the setters. So instead of saying this number of gloves, assignment operator number of gloves, we can say set number of gloves, and then we can get the number of gloves as a parameter from this constructor. The same for other attributes. We can say set punch speed, and then pass the punch speed as an argument to this method, and set punch power, and then pass the punch power. So here I refer to the get punch power, so I need to pass the punch power that we get as a parameter. So punch power. Okay, now it works fine. So we have an extra ending parenthesis, so I'm going to delete it. Now we don't need to have these attributes, so I'm going to comment them out. Next, we have these getters that refer to the attributes of the superclass, but because they are now declared as private, we cannot refer to them. So instead of saying return punch speed, we can say return get punch speed. So you can see that we can easily inherit these methods from the superclass. So get punch speed. And here we have a setter method for the set punch speed. So here we can call the set punch speed, and then pass the punch speed that we get as a parameter. So I'm going to comment this line of code. And then instead of saying return punch power, we can say get punch power. So can you see what we are doing here? We are refactoring our codes, right? We are changing our codes to be much more better, much more maintainable, much more professional. Okay, this is how we program our Android applications. This is the best programming practice. So here, instead of saying this.punch power, let's say set punch power, and then pass the punch power to the setter method. So let's comment out this line of code. So here we have the stamina. So we get the stamina from it is actually a static variable. You can see that it is a static variable, that it is also called a class variable, because by using the class we can access this attribute. So we don't have to worry about this stamina here, because it is a class variable, and other classes, by just referring to our class, can access the getter or the setter. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can see that how we are refactoring our codes. So if you also go to the Kickboxer class, you can see the same problems that we have here. So this is your challenge. Go ahead and solve these problems inside the Kickboxer class. You can see that we have some errors. And then continue watching this tutorial and see how I am going to solve this problem. So give it a go and good luck. So now let's go, and we have this get punch speed. So instead of saying return punch speed, I can say return get punch speed. So we inherit the get punch speed from the fighter class. So then we have this setter. So let's call the setter here set punch speed, and then pass the punch speed here. So let me comment out this line of code. Then we have return punch power. So return get punch power. Next we have set punch power. So let's call the setter set punch power, and then pass the punch power to this method. Next we have the constructor. So again, we are using these attributes that are private, so we can't use them anymore. So we need to call the setter. So set punch speed, and then pass the punch speed. And finally the set punch power, pass the punch power. So let me comment out these two lines of code here. So now let's go to the main activity class, and here you can see that we have a problem with this Kickboxer constructor. So if I hover over it, it says that the arguments that we pass to this constructor cannot be applied to the arguments that we have here. So we need to first pass the number of gloves, the kick speed, the kick power, the punch speed, and also the punch power. So it seems that we haven't passed the punch power to this constructor. So I need to put a comma here and type in here a value for the punch power. So now the problem is solved. And here you can see that if I type in, for example, my boxer, I can access the getters and also the setters of this object. So remember what I told you about instance variables? We have also instance methods. The getters and the setters that we created inside the boxer class are all methods, and they are all instance methods. They are all exclusive to an object or to an instance of type boxer class. So we can access all of the setters and the getters because all of them are declared as public. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you want to, you can go ahead and set a value for the punch power or punch speed of the boxer, or also the number of gloves, and you can also output those values to the screen or to the log. We have no problems regarding the outputting these values. But now that we learned about inheritance, let's learn about methods. So here you can see that we have this breakpoint on the left sidebar in line number 13. So in order to delete a breakpoint, you can just clicking on it, and then it is now deleted. Let's go and open the Boxer class, and here I want to create some methods or instance methods. We have also static methods. So first let's about instance methods. So before the ending curly brace of this Boxer class, I'm gonna create a method, and let's say that it is public. Next, we need to specify the return type of our method. So let's say the return type of this method is string. So make sure to type in here string with capital S. And then after specifying the return type, we need to specify the name of the method. So the name is going to be throw jab. And then we need to put a pair of parentheses. If you want to specify some parameters for this method, you can put inside the parentheses. But this method doesn't have any parameters. And then you just need to open and close this method by using an opening curly brace followed by a closing curly brace. So now it's showing us an error on this ending curly brace. It says missing return statement. This means that because this method returns a value of type string, we must return a value from this method because the return type is a string. So we just need to say return, for example, 2 quotes and then semicolon. So if you put 2 quotes here, this means an empty string value, and that's enough to satisfy the compiler so that it can allow us to run the application. But it says throw jab. So here I can say return jab, the string value jab. So how do we use this method? We can go inside the main activity class, and then here, because we have an instance method inside the Boxer class, we can say my Boxer dot throw jab semicolon. The throw jab method returns a string value, so we can get that returned string value and show it on the screen. So we can go ahead and open the activity underline main.xml. So here you can see that it is not showing us the layout. So we need to build the project so that the problem will be solved. Let's click on build at the top and then click on rebuild project. So after the build process is finished, here you can see that now we can see the layout. So now let's go ahead and delete this hello world text view. And then we need to drag a button into a screen. So here inside this palette section, you can just search for a button inside the search area and then drag this button, and let's put it here at the top. So let's add the constraints. Remember what I told you about methods? I told you that methods are just a chunk of code that does something. So we want the user to click on this button and something to happen. So let's select this button, and first let's give this button an ID. So btn throw jab, and then press an enter key to submit this value. Let's change the text of this button to throw jab. So just type in here throw jab. So now let's go inside the main activity class. So at the top of the file inside this class, I'm gonna declare this button. So because it is going to be an instance variable, I'm gonna declare it as private, and then let's specify the data type. It is going to be button, and the name of the variable is going to be btn throw jab. So here you can see that I am naming my variables according to the ID that I specified inside the layout. You can name your variables whatever you want, but I think it's a very good programming practice to name your variables to be the same as the name of the ID that we specified inside the XML file. So now let's go inside the onCreate method and let's initialize our button. So after calling this setContentView, I'm gonna say btn_throw. So let's change this btn_throw to btn_throw_jab. So btn_throw_jab, assignment operator, and then let's say find view by ID r.id dot btn_throw_jab. Now let's go ahead and scroll down here, and then inside this, after the ending curly brace of this onCreate method, we need to have a function that is going to be executed when the button is clicked. So let's go inside this activity underline.xml and let's search for the onClick attribute, and then let's type in here throw_jab is clicked. So you can see that when I wrote this value, it didn't successfully submit this value. So you can just switch to the text tab, and then we can write this attribute here. We can add another attribute and type in here onClick, and then type in here throw_jab is clicked. So next, let's go ahead and copy this value. So here you can see that it's showing us an error. This means that the corresponding method handler, this method throw_jab is clicked, is not declared inside the main activity. So it says that it didn't found this method inside the Java file. So we need to go to the main activity class, and let's say that we have a public method. The return type is void. It doesn't return anything, and the name of the method is the same value that we specified for the onClick attribute for our button, and then a pair of parentheses. So this method is going to have a parameter of type view, which is going to be the button that is going to be clicked or tapped. So button view. So here you can see that it couldn't successfully import the view class to our file. So I'm going to type it again, and then here you can see that we get the view from the Android.view. So if I press the enter key on my keyboard now, it's going to select this view and import this class into our file. So now the problem is solved. So button view. Next, let's go ahead and open our method by using these curly braces. Now, here, I'm going to get the returned value of the throw_jab method of the boxer class and show it as a toast message. So when this button is clicked, I'm going to show a toast message. I'm going to say toast dot. So you can see that the toast is a class. And when I say dot, I can call the method makeText. So the method makeText is a class method, like the class variables or static variables. A class method can be called on a class. So first we need to pass the context, which is going to be this, and then comma. So if you want to be a little bit more specific about the context is the current class or the current activity. So I can say this dot main activity, or excuse me, main activity dot this, main activity dot this, comma. So the second argument that we need to pass here is the message, or is the string value that we get from the throw_jab method that we declared inside the boxer class. So you can see that as the second argument of this makeText method, we need to pass an argument of type char sequence, which is a little bit the same as the string. So I'm going to type in here my boxer, so I cannot refer to the my boxer variable that holds the boxer object. So how we can solve this problem? This is your challenge. So you need to somehow find a solution to this problem so that we can refer to the my boxer variable that holds the boxer object and then call the throw_jab method. So hopefully that makes sense. Give this challenge a go and then continue watching this tutorial and see how I am going to solve this problem. Good luck. So now let's go ahead and scroll to the top, and then let's go ahead and just copy this boxer, my boxer here, and paste it inside a class, semicolon. Then we don't have to put the data type here before the name, we just need to delete this boxer class, this data type. And then inside the onCreate method, we just refer to the variable, and then we initialize our variable inside the onCreate method. So we have a boxer object with the number of gloves 0, punch speed 400, and the punch power 900. So now let's scroll down here. And then as the second argument of this toast message, we can say my boxer. You can see that now we can access the boxer variable because it is in the higher scope. So my boxer dot frojab. The frojab method returns a value of type string, so that's why we can put it as the second argument of this makeText function and show that returned string value, comma, and finally we need to specify the duration, so length long, so toast.length long, and then call the show method on this toast object dot show. This is very important. If you don't put this dot show here, it is not going to show you the toast message. So now let me create a new line. So, okay, let's go ahead and run our app and let's see what happens. So now it seems that our application is crashed. So let's go ahead and then let's open our logcat and let's see what's wrong here. Let's click on error. Let's delete the value of this tag. So it says that in line number 19, there is a problem inside the boxer class in line number 19. So let's go ahead and debug our application by using the breakpoints. So in line number 19 inside the main activity class, I'm going to create a breakpoint in this line of code that says set content view that is going to set the activity underline main.xml as the layout of the screen. And then I'm going to click on the debug icon at the top. So next, let's take a look at the debugging area, and then let's continue stepping over and let's see what is happening here. So this line of code is executed perfectly, and then it's going to execute this line of code. So I'm going to click on step over, and now it's going to go ahead and execute this line of code that is going to create an object of type boxer. So here in the variables area at the bottom, you can see that we have some variables. The first one is the btn frojab, so it is perfectly initialized. We don't have any problems with this one. But take a look at this my boxer variable, it is null. So if I click on step over again, and here you can see that now that this line of code is executed and the my boxer variable is initialized, here we have an object of type boxer, and it is assigned to this myBoxer variable. If I open it, you can see that these attributes here, for example, number of gloves, punch power, punch speed. So I'm gonna, now it is about to execute this line of code that is going to create an object of type kickboxer. I'm gonna click on step over. So now we can see that here is the problem. In the variables area, we can see some data, and here we can see that it opened a file called looper.java, and here we have something called an exception is thrown. So now we know where is the error. So we can go to the main activity class, and here it is the cause of the error. Here in line number 27, where we are creating an object of type kickboxer, is the cause of the error. So let's see what's happening here. We are creating an object of type kickboxer, and here is the object. We have the number of gloves. So here you can see that for the number of gloves, we passed, for example, 500 as the value. And we have the kick speed, kick power, punch speed, and the punch power. So let's go ahead and change the number of gloves to number 2. And then let's go ahead and click on the debug at the top, and let's see what happens if I change this value. Remember, in programming, you're going to spend most of your time debugging your application. And most of the times you don't know what to do. So you're going to change, for example, a feature or maybe a value and see what happens and see whether you can solve the problem or not. So here we, for example, changed the number of gloves of this kickboxer here to 2. So let's see what happens. Let's click on step over, step over, step over. And now it is about to execute this line of code. So in the previous execution, of our application, this line of code was the cause of the crash. Now let's go ahead and click on step over and see whether it crashes or not. So it again crashed. So now let's, at the top, let's click on the desktop app here and then click on debug, because this time we know that what is going to be the cause of the error. So instead of creating a breakpoint in line number 19 that is going to set the content view, let's go ahead and delete this breakpoint in line number 19 and let's create a breakpoint in line number 23, so that from here we can control the flow of the program. Let's click on debug again. Now let's click on step over. And then in this line of code, instead of clicking step over in order to execute this line of code in its entirety, let's click on step into. So now it went into the constructor of the Kickboxer class. Now let's go ahead and click on step over and execute this line of code that is going to call the constructor of the super class. And let's see what happens. So now we know that what is actually the cause of the error. Here inside the Kickboxer class, when this line of code is executed, the calling of the super constructor, the application crashes. So now we can go ahead and click on the debug app again. Here I am showing you how you can debug your application by using the debugging capabilities of the Android Studio IDE. So now I'm going to click on step over again to execute this line of code that is going to create a new object of the boxer and assign it to this variable. And then in this line of code, instead of step over, let's click on step into. Now it is going to call the constructor of the superclass. So again, instead of step over, let's click on step into. Now here we are inside the constructor of the boxer class. So again, here it's going to execute this line of code that is going to call the constructor of the superclass, which is the fighter class. So this time I'm going to click on step over and see what happens. So there was nothing wrong with the calling of the constructor of the superclass, but here we have this if statement. And now if I click on step over, so here you can see that it is checking whether the number of gloves or the punch speed or the punch power values is a valid value or not. So now it went ahead and it's going to execute this line of code. So now it's going to execute this set number of gloves method. Now I'm going to click on the debug, and then let's click on step over and let's see what happens. So now you can see that we are much more nearer to see what is actually the cause of the problem. So inside the boxer class, when we try to execute this line of code in its entirety, set number of gloves, then the application crashed. So now this time, let's go ahead and create a breakpoint for this calling of this constructor of the superclass inside the boxer class, inside the constructor of the boxer class. So let's go inside the main activity class and delete this breakpoint that we created in line number 23, because now we are much more nearer to the cause of the problem. So we can now create a breakpoint here and then start controlling the flow of the program from this line of code. So let's click on the debug at the top. So now you can see that how we can debug an application in Android. Sometimes, and most of the times, you are going to wind up with such bugs in your app and you need to somehow find the bug. So this is how you can find it. This is very great feature of Android Studio that is going to give you a lot of tools to debug your application. So now let's go ahead and click on step over, because we know that this line of code isn't actually the cause of the problem. So let's click on step over and then this if statement. So let's click on step over, and then here we are in line number 27 that is going to execute this line of code. So I'm going to click on step into, and then here it's going to execute the constructor of the super class inside the constructor of the kickboxer. So I'm going to click on step into, and then it's going to execute this line of code calling the constructor of the superclass inside the constructor of the boxer class. So we know that this line of code again isn't the cause of the problem. I'm going to click on step over. So now here we are. So excuse me, it seems that I have mistakenly clicked on the step into. So in order to go back to where we was, we just need to click on step out. Okay, now let's click on step over for this if statement. Now here in line number 37, we can see that it's going to execute this set number of gloves. So we know that this line of code is the cause of the problem. So now I'm going to click on step into. Here you can also see these icons here. If you hover over them, the first one is the step over, the second one is the step into, the third one is the forced step into. So I do not recommend to use this option here for now, but the fourth icon is the step out. So if you step into a process and you want to step out, you just need to click on this step out. Now let's click on step into for this set number of gloves. Okay, now we are inside the boxer class and we are inside the set number of gloves method, this setter method. So now let's go ahead and click up step over and see what happens. It's going to execute this if statement. So step over. So the number of gloves value is not equal to 0. So now it's about to execute this line of code. Set number of gloves. So let's go ahead and click on step into. So now we are inside the, again, boxer class. And then it's about to execute this set number of gloves method. So let's click on the debug at the bottom. And if I click on step over, and if I click on step into again, so because we are calling this set number of gloves from the fighter class, so I'm going to click on step into. So it went back to this if statement. It's kind of weird. So let's click on step over and click on step over. So it seems that the methods here are actually conflicting with each other. So for example, you know that the boxer class is inheriting from the fighter class. And the fighter class has already these attributes and these getters and setters for these attributes. So let's go inside the boxer class. And first let me stop the debugging process. And here let me tell you that we don't need these getters and setters unless we want to have a specific condition for an object of a boxer class. I will talk about that later. For now, let's go ahead and let's delete all of the getters and setters for the instance variables that we inherit from the fighter class. So inside this boxer class, I'm going to delete this getter for the number of gloves and this setter for the number of gloves here, because we already have these methods inside the fighter class, and this boxer class can inherit those methods because they are declared as public. So here it is the constructor. We don't have to change this one. Next, let's go ahead and delete this get punch speed, set punch speed, get punch power, and set punch power. So don't worry about the stamina. This stamina variable is specific to our boxer class. So let's delete these ones. Now, here, let me just delete this empty space here. So let me delete this breakpoint, and then we have the get stamina, set stamina, and the throw jab. So it's okay. Let's also go inside the kickboxer class. So we don't need again these getters and setters for the instance variables that we already inherit from the fighter class indirectly. So this kickboxer class inherits from the boxer class directly, and it inherits also from the fighter class indirectly. So now we don't need the getter and the setter for the punch speed and punch power. So I'm gonna delete these ones. So also the set punch speed, get punch power, and the set punch power. So let me delete this empty space. And then we have this constructor for the kickboxer, so we don't have to worry about this one. We have the get kick power and set kick power, and we have also the get kick speed. And we don't have the set kick speed. It seems that we deleted this one in the previous tutorial. So if you want to, you can add it here. You can just right click generate and then click on setter and then create a setter for the kick speed. So now let's go ahead and run our application and see whether the problem is solved or not. So choose the run button here. Instead of debugging, click on run, choose a device and then click on OK. So here you can see that the application is running. And if I click on this throw jab here, it is showing us this toast message jab. So if I click on it again, it says jab. So here you can see that inside the main activity class, so when the button is tapped or clicked, this function is executed, throw jab is clicked, and then we are showing this message. How we get the message? First, we are referring to our boxer object, my boxer, and then we are calling this method, throw jab. And then when we want to show this message, when this method is called, throw jab, so you can see this value, the returned value of the throw jab method is shown to the user, jab. So another important point that I want to talk about here is that, so you can see that we have the getters and the setters created here inside this class. So inside the kickboxer class, we don't have to create them again. We don't have to, for example, create a getter or a setter for the instance variables of the superclass. So that's why we deleted them. And the reason that you saw our application crashed was the confliction that was produced there. So if you open the boxer class here, and for example, you might not be satisfied with the implementation of the set punch speed method that we created inside the fighter class. So we know that the boxer is a fighter because of the inheritance relationship here. So the fighter class has a method called set punch speed, right? This method is public. This means that the subclass, which is going to be the boxer class, can access this method and also change the implementation of this method. So if you go to the boxer class and here, just type in here set, inside an empty area, just type in here set punch speed. So you can see that the autocomplete feature of Android Studio is showing you these two methods. The first one is the set punch power. So here you can see a description of the method. It says it is public, the return type is void, the name is set punch power, and this method accepts an argument of type integer, which is going to be the punch power. So the second suggestion is the set punch speed. So this is the one that we want to work on. I'm going to select this method. So now I selected this method. Here you can see that we have this override keyword. So this is what I want to talk about here, about methods. The methods that we want to change the implementations. For example, this boxer class wants to change the implementation of the set punch speed method that inherits from the fighter class. So because we want to change the implementation of this method that we inherit from the fighter class, we must put the @ override keyword before the method or above the method. And then we can use this method. Then you can see that here it is this our method, and inside the curly braces of this method, we have also this one, super.set punch speed. So super refers to an instance of type superclass. Superclass in this case is the fighter class. So when it says super, it is referring to an instance of the fighter class or an object of the fighter class, and then it is calling this method set punch speed. Then it gets the punch speed from this parameter. So here it is calling the set punch speed implementation of the superclass or the fighter class. So inside this fighter class, you can see that this set punch speed method is implemented like this. It is assigning the punch speed parameter to the punch speed instance variable. So you can go to the boxer class and you can completely delete this line of code, and you may want to, for example, completely change the implementation of this method inside the boxer class, and you don't want the implementation of the superclass. So you can just completely delete this line of code and you can put a completely different logic here. So we just need to put this super here because we don't have to worry about changing the implementation in this application, but if you want to, you can change the implementation here. So here I wanted to let you know that you can inherit methods from the superclass, but you must put the @ override keyword. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go to the main activity class. So here it is, our throw jab is clicked. So when the user taps on this throw jab button, the jab text is shown to the user. So we get the jab text from the throw jab method that we have inside the boxer class. As you can see here, it returns a value and it is jab. So now here it is your challenge. You need to go ahead and put more buttons here for the throw cross, throw hook, throw uppercut. So these are the methods that are for the boxer class, and also for the kickboxer class, put 2 more buttons here for the throw kick, throw side kick, and throw front kick. And make sure to create methods for all of these buttons, and then get the return value and show the returned value as a toast message to the user. The same logic that we used for this throw jab button. So hopefully that makes sense. So in the next video, we are going to learn about interface in Java. So interface is somehow an advanced concept in Java programming, and we are going to learn it, and we are going to also create applications, Android applications, to learn this important concept in Android. So I'll see you in the next video, and if you have any questions about the topics that you've learned so far, please post a discussion in the course, and then I will do my best to answer all of your questions. So I'll see you next.